Sure. I'm Rick Gagliuso. I'm an attorney practicing out of Merrimack, New Hampshire. My practice is largely devoted to construction, which has nothing to do with what we're here to talk about tonight. But it also includes representing newspapers and media outlets, which I've done for many years and which I really love. And so my First Amendment background and experience kind of comes out of that newspaper media work that I do.
Hi, Zoltan Mesko. I'm a former NFL player, currently in IBM with business analytics projects in financial services industries. As a side project, I am working on somewhat of a concussion mitigation project now that it's very near and dear to my heart. So excited to be here.
I'm Mary Anne Marsh, a Democratic analyst and political strategist with the Dewey Square Group in Boston. I do political analysis for Channel 5 in Boston, seen up here with the MUR, and also Fox News.
I'm Sally Gaglini, I'm a famous lawyer, and I run Boston.
Don Davis, former player, currently working for the NFL Players Association.
I'm Judge Dwayne Woodruff, 12 years with the Steelers, currently dealing with mostly family court issues, juvenile delinquency, dependency in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thanks for everyone here on the panel to participate. I will talk briefly about the topic, and then we'll turn it over to the panelists to ask some questions about an issue that remains in the news that has not gone away now over a year, maybe 2 years. And it doesn't seem to have any end game in sight. And of course, this topic is about, generally speaking, the right and responsibility of players to voice out their views on the issue of the national anthem, specifically NFL players, but we can certainly extend the point to other athletes. And there are really two key questions. One is whether they can do it under their NFL contract and under NFL rules. And then the second is whether they ought to, whether they should be able to, and if so, what are the rationales for doing so? And why don't we just begin with the area of law that's sort of most often cited, and that's the First Amendment, and whether or not it's even applicable to this situation, given that this is a matter of a private employer and private employees. And Rick, maybe I could begin with you, given your work on the First Amendment. You're probably the leading expert here. So how does the First Amendment, first of all, what does the First Amendment say generally, and how does it fit in here?
Well, I don't know if I'm the leading expert on anything here. But you know, the First Amendment has 5 freedoms you're familiar with, and one of them is freedom of speech. And so it's constantly cited as the backbone of the right that we all enjoy or think we enjoy to say what we want to say when we want to say it. And but the First Amendment is often misunderstood in this way, and the misunderstanding is, despite the first opening words of the First Amendment, which say something like Congress shall make no law, and it is actually a part of the Constitution that applies only to government action. And it's been, originally when it was written, it obviously applied to Congress or federal action. Now it's been extended by court decisions to the states and other government entities as well. But it still applies only to the government. And so when I hear people yelling and screaming about it, I have a First Amendment right to speak, you got to back up and ask yourself, is there government action involved here? Is the government imposing some restriction on your speech rights, or telling you what you can say and when you can say it? And the whole National Anthem thing with Colin Kaepernick always puzzled me, because I could never find any government action there. And I know there was some arguments made at one time about, you know, stadiums that were owned or funded by government entities and things like that. And I think people tried to sort of construct some First Amendment arguments around that. But for the most part, my understanding is that those were private, these folks that are playing and being part of an NFL team are there because they have contracts with the team and collective and are part of a collective bargaining agreement with the league. And I don't think there's government action involved, and therefore, I don't think the First Amendment applies for the most part. And I'm sure I've just oversimplified it enormously, but that's my quick take on this.
Judge Woodruff, when you hear about employment matters, and in this context, of course, teams potentially sanctioning players for kneeling during the anthem or taking some other form of protest, in general speaking, can private employers fire employees for speaking out on political issues or other topics?
Well, first of all, I agree with everything that was said in regard to the First Amendment. Even with government entities, there is a limit in regard to so-called free speech as well. So we're not totally free to say whatever we want anytime we want. So there's some limitations there as well. But in regard to private companies, the NFL is much a different animal than your normal private company because they're really like a monopoly. But there's an exception for the NFL as well. When I played, there was nothing in the contract that would limit me from exercising, my rights as a private citizen to do whatever it is that I felt I wanted to do. I believe it may be the same way now in the NFL. It's not the same in the NBA. My wife and I, we're sort of on two different tracks in regard to the Kaepernick thing, but she, in the NBA, there's no one that kneels, but it's part of their contract as well, so there's some ramifications. But at the same time, they are very outspoken and vocal in regard to their feelings and what they want to do. And I haven't heard any of them being fired. And there hasn't been any in the NFL actually being fired as well. The issue comes because now you got a player that, in my humble opinion, is pretty good. But he's not on any NFL team at this particular time. And so does each team have the right to do that? I believe that they do. But I believe it's a separate issue if all the teams together or colluding together to keep him out of the league. Now we're talking about something that's different, that calls for legal ramifications in regard to the NFL. So that's what we're talking about. And I just recently, I guess the Seahawks, I guess there were two reports. One, they canceled his workout altogether, and then there was another report saying they just postponed it because the draft is coming up to a later time. I know which one I believe, but I think there is some issues with the NFL if they're colluding to keep him out of the league at this point.
Do you think there could be, I know there's no evidence yet that surfaced, but what does your gut tell you about it?
Well, there's no evidence, but you got 32 guys in the room together, and for there not to be collusion on anything that goes on in the NFL, I think there's some type of collusion going on. I mean, it's just based on the history of the teams and the owners in the past. I think there is some, but what I think doesn't matter is what you can prove in court.
Sally, you've represented a number of persons in the entertainment industry. Have you had issues come up where their outspokenness perhaps has led to some kind of employment or contractual problem for them?
Well, the morals clause is a pretty big hurdle. And so if you represent, if you're an agent or you're a manager, you're going to try to make that morals clause as tiny as you possibly can make it. And if you are if you're representing the company, you're going to try to make that morals clause as broad and also as comprehensive as you can make it. And because what you want to try to do if you're on the money side of the equation is to minimize the company's risk. So that if somebody speaks out against a brand, if you are acquiring, there was an actor, actually this actress I think some time ago, and she was pitching one of the trade associations, and she disclosed that she actually is either a vegan or she doesn't drink milk. I mean, it was one of those, and yet she was pitching it, and that was a very short relationship. So to answer your question, absolutely, it happens constantly. Yeah.
And Zoltan, when you look back at your own career, could you have imagined players kneeling while you were playing during the anthem?
I guess, yeah, I'm just a few years removed from it. A lot of things were done maybe behind closed curtains, but I don't know, I guess there's been a lot of progress made even in the past few years, so it's been very exponential in my opinion. And I guess, so your question being if I would have seen it, or?
Are you surprised that it's happening now?
Not really. I think, with today's generation, we're a lot more outspoken, and it just comes with the nature of the beast there.
How about the reason for this is really open to anyone. Why are players kneeling? I mean, I think that's sort of, it's not clear that there's one reason for the players. Again, protest is sort of kind of a loaded word, right? This is sort of expressing themselves, you might say, rather than protest. Any thoughts on or are there multiple reasons why they're kneeling? Open up to Don.
I would say there's multiple reasons, but I think the main reason or the catalyst truly was what our current president said in response to the NFL allowing players to kneel. And once the president made that comment, that was the one that sparked all of the country. And so I think that the collective of the NFL, no matter where they sat on the anthem issue, felt as if they had to speak out come against what the president.
And Don's comment gets at President Trump's comments last fall during a campaign speech for U.S. Senator Luther Strange. The president talked about NFL TV ratings being down. I think he said that they were down tremendously. I don't know if the data actually supports that. It's probably a fairly modest decline. But nonetheless, they are down, and they were down at the time. And he explained this decline in ratings to players, I think specifically Colin Kaepernick, kneeling. And I'm not directly quoting him, but he said something to the effect of, the fans should walk out. I would fire him. I think he emphasized the word fire. And I think he called Kaepernick a son of a blank, if I'm not, yeah, right.
That's correct.
It's correct. So pretty strong language. And then the consequence to that, as Don mentioned, was players spoke out. Players, immediately on Twitter, there were a number of players who tweeted out. And then, of course, the kneeling didn't go down, but actually went up. And Mary Anne, your background in terms of political consulting, when you see the president obviously at the top, but any candidate, it seemed like his intention was to dissuade players from doing it, but it actually had the opposite effect.
I actually see it differently.
Okay.
I think Donald Trump did this. This was more about politics than it was about patriotism. For him, he started his entire political career on divide and conquer politics. That was his foundation, it still is. And his cornerstone is race and culture. Now remember, to your point, this comes on the heels of a year's worth of activism. First you had the Women's March, then you had communities of color coming out, Black Lives Matters. And in the summer of that terrible tragedy in Charlottesville, Donald Trump stood up and equated people who protested to stand up for the rights of everyone with the Nazis, frankly, who were marching in the streets of Charlottesville. That was unacceptable. So for Donald Trump, when he saw this opportunity, it was like hitting for the cycle for him. It was too good to pass up. And for 5 months, 3 days a week, he had an NFL game that he could use for his own purposes, to distract the media, distract the country, to pay attention to this fight instead of all the things over here that really mattered to everybody. So he played it again and again and again. And it's his sweet spot because he is desperate to hold on to the 35% of the people in this country who support him. The majority of them are the perfect demographic for NFL viewers. White men, men in general, 50 or older, that's the demographic that watches the NFL. That's his demographic as well. And men 50 and older opposed the kneeling during the National Anthem, but 50 and under, and especially 45 and under, they supported it. And that's declining viewership. Now, the viewership of the NFL was declining starting in 2015. It wasn't down a ton, it was down like 5%. But when you, as someone who does campaigns and a polling fanatic, and you look at demographics and all that, that was his sweet spot. So he played that all day long. And he had, a lot of the owners supported him. He took on the NFL. There's a lot of big money in the NFL. The owners are very, very wealthy. And so are a lot of the players. And the majority of players, 68%, are African American. And they all, virtually all of them, opposed Donald Trump. So it was the perfect foil for him. And he played it all the time.
And I'd like to add also, you know, we sort of forget about, you know, your last question as to why this began in the first place. And with Colin, you know, it began because of the poor treatment that blacks were receiving in America.
That's right.
And still receive even today. So that was the whole thing of it from the beginning. It wasn't because he wasn't patriotic. He was kneeling because he felt and still feels that America could be much better than what it is. And so that's why, you know, he decided to kneel to bring attention, you know, to that. And I think he's done a great job in regard to that. You know, with Trump, and I want to get to the First Amendment as well. You know, with Trump, you know, he was all about, you know, I agree with you. Let's take off the focus in regard to what's happened in America, and let's put it back on him and Trump. And so he always comes up with something else. But the issue is America where it should be? And I think we all agree that it's not. There are a lot of things that are going on that you know, shouldn't happen. The question in regard to the First Amendment, because when are you not the president once you're elected? And so if you have a Twitter account, or you're speaking on TV, or you're speaking as the president, or you're speaking as a private individual. I believe that once you're elected, you're the president, and it's 24/7. You know, I know it's that way for me. I'm a judge. You know, it's 24/7. I get phone calls all the time to make decisions. I think it's the same way with the president. So the question now is the First Amendment being violated? When the president makes such statements, you should fire him, or because, you know, the influence of the government is part of the First Amendment as well, as opposed to anything else. So now there's some question, is Colin's First Amendment rights being violated because of governmental interference?
Because the president has sort of brought in the prospect of the First Amendment coming into play.
Yeah. I was going to mention the same thing Judge Woodruff said. So it was police brutality that started off in 2016, right? Then it started trickling away, even though the numbers of players that started kneeling started going up a little bit. But I think in the media it started trickling down, and then the Trump comments came out, I believe, September of 2017.
Right.
That's what spiked the numbers to go above 100 players in that certain week. Yeah, but it went from police brutality to comments.
Protesting the president, at least the president's.
You know, you mentioned Charlottesville,
Right.
And that was a huge, grotesque event that everyone felt like this shouldn't happen. And so now you got that coupled with, you know, again, the president's comments. So you had the perfect catalyst, and I agree. Yeah.
The one stat I did gather was 12% stopped watching. 28% of that 12% stopped watching because of the kneel.
Yeah.
Well, and to add just color to that, because our president does great at giving half facts. So yes, the ratings of the NFL are down. However, entertainment content across the board is down, and most entertainment is down in the double digits, 20% or more. And the NFL, while it's down 5%, is still in the top 9 of the top 10 shows. So it's still the most consumed product, entertainment product.
But you can't underestimate, for someone in politics and who does campaigns, you're always looking for news stuff and to try to use to your advantage. And the fact that he knew on any Sunday, Monday, or Thursday night, he had an opportunity to play that card. If something was going on with him that was negative, he could just put the big shiny object of the NFL up there and everybody followed it every single time. It was amazing.
The only question I have about that is that I think you may be giving him too much credit for having a coherent strategy behind this.
No, do not, hold on,
I
stop you
think
right
he's
there.
blurting things out
No,
thoughtlessly.
I'm going to say this. First of all, he's an evil genius, okay? He knows exactly what he's doing. And he plays that card all day, every day. I mean, there aren't news cycles anymore. It's a fire hose that never shuts off, okay? But he knows, especially right now, I mean, you use the word collusion. I talk about collusion all day long now, but not for the reasons you are. And that's what, and so he's, today it's Rudy Giuliani just joined his legal team. I mean, it's something every 10 minutes. And he's doing it on purpose, and that's what everyone's chasing everything every 10 minutes on cable TV now.
Don, how about the NFLPA's response? When you hear about, there's now a collusion case, of course, brought by Kaepernick. What role does the NFLPA play here, and how do you support him?
That's a great question. So the NFLPA is an entity that is run by players. It's governed by players, and one of the roles of the NFLPA is to provide grievance assistance. A grievance is a process whereby the collective bargaining agreement and the CBA, you can't just sue the employer. The employees, the players, can't just sue the employers. We have to go through our collectively bargaining process, which is a grievance process. So for him to file a grievance, then the NFLPA will assist with that. Colin Kaepernick got his own attorney, so we sit as like second chair. We are there to assist. When we come to the collusion claim, it will be a difficult claim to prove, because while you may know that owners are not signing him because of the protest, what you have to prove is that they all got together or called one another and said, don't sign him because he protested. And that is a much, much difficult claim to prove. And, we do the best we can. There's discovery. Everybody's being deposed. All the questions are being asked. And, that case will run its case. And the arbitrator, who is a former judge who sits over those arbitration cases, will make a ruling, determination.
I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I want to follow up on that. How does it work out? Potentially, someone could comment on it. If the owners come to this case saying that it's a dollars and cents issue, like maybe the Houston Texans, predominantly probably white fan base, they're not going to take it well down in Texas. That's why we didn't hire them. If it's like it's going to hurt our brand, ticket sales are going to go down by 23%. How does that play out? I guess when it's a business.
I think Don's right. Those are hard cases to prove, and you can argue it, and we can all sit here and feel like we have a gut feeling about it, but proving it is another thing. And owners and teams and franchises are going to come up with all kinds of reasons why they're doing what they're doing, and it's pretty hard to prove them wrong. I agree. It's
And all of them are going to come and say that. That's collusion.
Right.
So they're not going to say that. They may all think it, but they're not going to say it. And when you look at football, it is entertainment. That's what it's all about. So the public opinion has a huge effect in regard to what the NFL does, just like all major sports. So if something else would have been done, if every Sunday half the stadiums are half empty, it's going to be something else that they come up with, because it's all about dollars and cents to them. And they'll if you can play, then you should be on the field somewhere. And that's how they've always been historically. But it's different now in this one case.
And just to say that on that, they insulated themselves from a collusion claim. You know, last year when all this happened and people started whispering that, 4 owners went on the record as, oh, I'd sign him tomorrow, but I have 3 quarterbacks. So, you know, that,
Protected.
right, unless you discover something that says, again, that the document or any sort of
Email, text.
anything.
Right, that's, the discovery process might potentially lead, and collusion could be shown with just 2 teams. I mean, that's what could get the NFL in trouble, is if it's just 2 teams that had some, you know, off the mark conversation, and there's an electronic record of it, he then wins. I mean, that would show that he's being deprived the right of his collectively bargained right to sign with teams. So that, I'm curious to see where the discovery goes, if there's anything there.
Does revenue sharing lead to that conflict of interest? Right, because there's a portion of the revenue.
Yeah, I mean, I think in theory it does.
Yeah.
I think the teams are going to say, well, look, we do our own thing, and Judge Woodruff said, we'll sign the best guy available. But I agree, it's something's different about this. I mean, look at all the quarterbacks that were signed instead of Colin Kaepernick last year. Right? They're all way better than anyone who's not a former NFL player in this room. But it's hard in some cases to think in your head, why didn't he at least get a shot? And this isn't the first time that collusion, of course, has come up in sports. Baseball owners got in trouble with this because for years, baseball had something called the reserve clause. And the reserve clause allowed teams to renew players' contracts every year. So when you think, you know, why was Ted Williams so loyal? Why was Joe DiMaggio so loyal? They couldn't leave. Their contracts would be renewed year after year at modest increases.
I know exactly what that's like.
Yes. And until that end, until Kirk Flood brought a case, it wasn't successful, but it really galvanized players behind the idea that they shouldn't be, you know, stuck to one team while owners are making all this money through TV revenue. But in the mid-'80s, owners were found to have agreed that they wouldn't bid for other teams' free agents. So I think Jack Morris won something like 20 games, and then nobody wanted to sign him. Andre Dawson had like 40-something home runs, and nobody. It was just weird, right? Something's wrong. The system is showing something wrong. And eventually, through discovery, there was some evidence showing that the owners, in fact, had agreed to essentially bring back the reserve clause without calling it that. And I don't know if that's here, but I do know with electronic evidence, with just emails, if there's just 2 scouts on different teams making the wrong statement, and Kaepernick and the NFLPA lawyers get it, it could be really interesting.
And Michael, I want to say then, you know, so the proof, let's say you find that, then what people are just making sure that they don't really kind of know is that, then now you're looking at damages.
Yep.
But the damages aren't going to necessarily mean that, okay, you have to sign it.
Right.
The damages just mean, oh, okay, you're right, I'm sorry, you caught me, here's your check.
Up to 3 times.
Up to 3 times, and so what you have to do is you have to take which again, these are just playing it out. You look at what at his year, what is the contractual value for that, not what his market value is.
That's right.
So if as a 5th-year player, his would be like $625,000. So honestly, if they are caught, they're happily going to write that check for 2 point a week, right? Here you go. I'm so sorry. We didn't mean it. Have a nice life. Right?
But at least it would, on principle,
correct.
right? I mean, there would be
Principle is
some, I think that's what he wants, right? It seems like he's motivated by, you know, not necessarily, he wants to go back to the NFL, but he clearly has some other goal of sending a message, right? I think that's, to me, it seems like that's an animating force. Sally, what are your thoughts? And he wants to get in earlier, sorry.
No, this is about control and money. Okay, that's what this is. So, NFL TV ratings declined 9% in the regular season. 30-second ad revenue climbed almost the same level. Seasonal average was up 6% to 499,095 for a 30-second commercial. Okay. Fox's Green Bay Atlanta game, it was a 11% to 1.8 million. And on CBS, the Pittsburgh New England AFC game, it was up 5% at a 30-second commercial to 1.6 million.
Year over year.
This,
Previous
this,
AFC
just
game.
this, yeah.
It's big business.
It's huge business. And so what's, you know, from just where I sit, for what I do for work, this is about owners who have the resources, who are maintaining control of what they own, as are their stakeholders. I mean, if you flip it the other way, there was a player out of Nebraska, was his name Christian Peter or Peters?
Yes.
Who ended up not playing
The
for the New
Patriots
England
strategy.
Patriots.
Right.
Because of Myra Kraft.
Right.
Exactly. Myra
Years
Kraft
ago.
basically
Myra
said,
Kraft.
domestic violence background,
Right.
not gonna wear the New England Patriots brand. It isn't what we stand for.
Yep.
So, you know, it has gone, that door has flipped the other way. That's why this is so incredibly interesting, because it has so many layers. You know, you have the issue of social justice, and you could say, okay, well, you know, we're not going to hire this particular person, and as to everyone's point, you know, NFL is very different. There's a draft, there's a collective bargaining agreement, there are signatures. It's a different form, but if you say, well, I'm not going to hire this, but not a player, but I'm not going to hire this particular person because he is the president of the Black Republicans group on campus. Say, well, you know, I guess they could kind of sort of not hire that person. So, well, wait a minute. Why are they not hiring him? Are they not hiring him because he happens to be of color, or are they not hiring him because he's a Republican? And which way does that go? For social justice, you could say, well, wait a minute. It's okay to not want somebody in to your company because of a political bent. Yeah, but doesn't that back into an issue of color? So what's fabulous about this generation, the iGens and the millennials, is that you talk about everything, and you text, and it's social media, and the issues are just about impossible to ignore. Your generation is not allowing the older generation to quietly continue its business, and it's demanding more, and I think that that's fantastic, because we're here.
I think one other factoid to add is, for the NFL in general as an entity, you know, you got the NFL, you got the 32 owners which come underneath that. The NFL as an entity will be tough for them to go back on or change the rule, because the rule as it sits right now in the rule books, we talk about contracts, right? Contracts which say that you have a duty to basically uphold moral character and represent the Shield and its entities with respect.
Very vague language.
Very vague.
Right.
But you have a rule book which says that players must be on the sideline when the national anthem is played and should stand at attention peacefully. Should, with their helmets underneath their left arms, and anyone who violates this may be subject to penalty. So should and may are tough.
Yeah.
Then you have the Commissioner Roger Goodell and the head of the owners CEC coming out and saying we will respect the player's right to not stand.
Were you surprised by Goodell? I mean, Goodell's been so criticized for heavy-handedness, and yet here he didn't do that. Right? He actually was open. I mean, were his hands forced? I mean,
I think it was a strategy.
A strategy?
It's a strategy because by keeping the rule that way, now you push it to the club. Now you secretly tell the clubs to collude because we're not going to touch it. They can do what they want. And now you're hearing owners saying, hey, when you come here, you're not doing that, just so you know. And so now it's a little bit of a trick bag.
Well, it is a total fan, okay? Not a Roger Goodell, I'm a Patriots fan, clearly. But, I mean, players can do drugs, sell drugs, take drugs, use drugs, beat their wife, beat their girlfriend, Aaron Hernandez be a murderer, let's go down the list, and you never lose your job. But Colin Kaepernick, standing up for something he cares about and a First Amendment, has lost his job. And frankly, in a market, speaking to markets, I mean, it doesn't get more progressive than San Francisco, and the close second is Seattle. I mean, if he's gonna play anywhere and not have it hurt in a market, it would be one of those two places. So I don't understand how everything I listed at the front, those are broken laws. Colin Kaepernick's not breaking any law. And I think that fundamentally is so troubling.
The other issue I have with the collusion issue and claim, and I'm hoping the athletes up here can shed some light on this. As a fan, I go to sleep at night confident in the knowledge that the team I'm rooting for and the teams they're playing against are out for one thing, and it's to win. And they want to be the best, and they want to win the Super Bowl every year, and the things that's what drives their decisions. And that may be completely naive, I don't know. You can tell me if it is. But whenever I think about a collusion claim like Kaepernick, I think about what is it, what's in it for an NFL team or the NFL as a league to do this? What is it, why would they cut their nose off to spite their face if they've got a great player out there who could really contribute and help them achieve that goal that I think they're all out there trying to achieve? Is there some principle or value that they're chasing that's more important than putting a winning team on the field? It just isn't making sense to me. So tell me I'm naive and that I don't get it.
I would agree that that's the goal. However, you're neglecting the fact that by putting that player who has done something that my fan base and my sponsors, more importantly, don't like, costs me money. So yes, I want to win, but I want to win and make all the money I can. I don't want to win and be down 2% in my naming rights for my stadium because they want to pull the plug.
Is there a tension though with the coach there? Or if you're a coach and you're fighting to keep your job, and Colin Kaepernick in your mind is clearly better than the guy you have, don't you then push for Colin Kaepernick? Because you're thinking, I'm going to get axed at the end of the year. Could there be an issue with owners?
I was gonna
Get axed at the end of the year or axed right now?
Good question. Probably at the end of the year, right? Probably at the end of the year. Right.
I was going to say, I've heard the sentiment from some players from across the league that some teams are not interested in actually winning. They just want to stay afloat with a 500 record because it's a pretty decent free cash flow business, and it's kind of a corporate toy. It's like a yacht. I'm going to take my corporate clients on it and check it out. Right?
And I'll add the historical factor. Before 2011, when we signed this current CBA ties each club to a minimum cash spend of the salary cap at 89% per club, 95% total of the league. The previous CBAs didn't have that. There were 6 teams that spent less than 70% of its cash of the salary cap. And those teams may or may not be, we could look at those records, but why didn't you, so you ask, well, there's players out there that you could sign and pay money and win. Why wouldn't you do that? Because I only have to pay 70% and I can keep 30% of the profits. So yes, I want to win, but I want to win with this paying as little as possible. And even at the 89%, we have probably a third of the teams that are right at 88.9 to the penny. And so we have GMs who are told, coaches who want to win, who are told, the owner sits down with their salary cap guru and writes a number on there, and there's your figure. Coach, go and win with that.
But 2 of you played for Bill Belichick.
Yes.
I mean, could you imagine Bill Belichick being told you can't sign the player you prefer? I mean, I mean, aren't there some coaches that seem to be above that? I don't know if you two are willing to talk about it. I mean,
Well, let me just tell you this, I love your Patriots too, it's great, I mean, nothing wrong with that. But they're one of the ones at 88.999%, so, but they're winning, right? So everybody wants to know, well, how can I spend 89% and still win and be in the running every year? Now, every team doesn't have the Bill factor, yeah, and you have that, do have another Hall of Fame quarterback that's pretty good, but that's nonetheless, nobody knows if the secret sauce is it one without the other, but I think that even in winning teams, they're just trying to do it with as minimal investment as possible. Sorry.
I was going to say, some teams at 70%, there's only so much free agent talent to be had. So it's like, once the good receivers are off, why would I pay more than the market price for that one receiver? So it's kind of like what the NBA has gotten into. Like, I can't remember his first name, but Mozgov, when he won with the Cavs, I think he averaged like 2.5 points in the playoffs, and he got a 4-year, $60 million contract because the NBA has to pay that, right? So it's like, what are you paying for?
right.
I'm surprised nobody has brought up yet the Bill Belichick brand of free speech, which which is, that whatever restrictions the league or the teams may impose, Bill has his own, I think, his own view of what players ought to be able to say and do.
Well, ask Malcolm Butler.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Speaking of not putting people on.
So I don't know, I mean, we were talking about the contractual restrictions that exist. But Bill's got his own, I think.
And Mary Ann's reference to Malcolm Butler is a really good one, right? Because a lot of people believe that the Patriots win the Super Bowl if Malcolm Butler plays. So is Belichick so insistent upon this conduct issue or speech issue that he's willing to lose a Super Bowl? Any thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we've all heard the same
I
story.
agree.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
But you look at like Jerry Jones, I mean, he clearly an owner who he knew he could say what he said, which was no Dallas Cowboy will kneel.
Yeah.
He knew he could say, I mean, people were pissed. They were like, well, you need to make him say why? None of his players have, in any of the weeks prior, had exercised their right. And so he knew he could say that.
And then he took it himself.
And then, well, right, and so, but you saw how
Before the
even
game,
right before the
right.
game, it was after President Trump said what he said. And I think his players said, look here now, I know you take care of us, but this is we're not doing it. And so he, in order to exercise his control, was like, we're all gonna do it together.
I mean, I think you heard a lot anecdotally, and some reported, about rifts in the locker rooms between African American players and white players. I know personally, as a Patriots fan, crushed by the fact that Belichick, Kraft, and Tom Brady supported Trump. Like that, for me, that was like, oh, bad. So, but I think that really hurt some of the locker rooms across the league. And when that issue came up, that's why you then saw Jerry Jones taking a knee, and the Patriots for 1 week doing this I'll hold on to the person next to me thing for a week or two. I mean, Chris Long, give him all the credit in the world. I mean, was with the Patriots, went to the Philadelphia, and he walks his talk. I mean, he puts his money where his mouth is, he gives it to charity, and he says and does all the right things. And you'd like to see more people like that. But that was a big riff in a lot of locker rooms.
Quick story, I think it's pertaining to you. Do teams not want to win? And Jerry Jones, I know for a fact, I know this story from another specialist. He told me when Terrell Owens was with the Cowboys, Jerry Jones would turn to his clients, hey guys, check this out, throw a deep to and they had to run yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
There's the job.
Yeah.
I can
So it's
play.
like, yeah, it's like, so now I have 2 downs to work with,
Could one remedy to the situation be changing this procession before the game, right? The idea that the anthem is played. But this is not some long-standing tradition. I think it's 2007 or 8 or 9, so even more recent. Why was this brought? Any thoughts on this? Why was it brought into the procession before a game, and could removing it be a remedy? Any thoughts on that?
Well, first, that we know that in 2009, supposedly, the Department of Defense paid the NFL in order to make sure that the players were on the field. So, you know, when you add that into the factoid into it, you know, it's a little disingenuous, I think, to say that with a player deciding to exercise his right that he's being disrespectful, when you don't think it's disrespectful that the country has to pay the entity in order to display the colors and have the players out there. So I think that's the first thing. And two, there's absolutely no way you can go back.
No.
I mean, there's just no way they would pull players off the sideline now, irregardless of that fact, because, again, to your point, which is absolutely brilliant, the CBA is all about control and money. And we say that to our players all the time. That then shows a lack of control. And thereby we're trying to take control. And one of the things that owners personally were wounded with was fans saying that they were scared of players. Hated that. Out of some of their own mouths. We can't have that. We can't have the fans thinking that. And so that's just no way. They would, I mean, you could have, I think the likelihood of them imposing a rule, changing what they said, would be more likely than having players.
Well, the other part of it is, why would you change it when at almost every major event, sporting or otherwise, you always play the national anthem? The only thing that's different is Donald Trump. That's the only reason this is a thing, period, and a sentence, is him. And if you then took it away, you'd be giving him the biggest gift ever. So many things we do in our everyday lives now have been changed because of him. The way we speak, the way things get covered, you know, whether the FBI, the law enforcement, the Justice Department, go down the list, are telling the truth, fake news. I mean, I go on and on all day. So why would we change that just because of one person who's not going to be there forever? We shouldn't.
I don't think we can go back. I mean, that's the NFL. Again, it's entertainment. It's all about money. When you look at the public, they expect from the National Anthem to be played, as in every other sport that I'm aware of as well. And if you take it away, you're taking something that's worked for the NFL. You want to make it like baseball, the American dream, the American sport. NFL with the shield and all the commercials, that's what they're driving toward. Not just here in America, but they want to be the world sport. So there's many more things coming. I'm sure the Players Association world that's coming to expand this thing, worldwide. And so that's, they're not going to go back. It's going to be more and more things that bring more and more people to the game. That's what it's all about. And one of the biggest problems, again, we talk about money and control. They can't control Colin Kaepernick, and they're scared about that.
But they can control his endorsements.
Well, they can.
And so, watch and wait.
Right.
And so, you have to look at what the short-term effect is and then what the longer-term effect is. So, genie's out of the bottle, right?
But, there's going to be something else. It's Colin Kaepernick now, this time. He has a strong commitment to addressing an issue, and that's what he's doing. He's protesting. In protests, when you have protests, it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. That's what it is. It's not your protest to make everybody feel good. It's a protest to show a problem that's going on so it can be changed. So if it doesn't make you uncomfortable, it doesn't get you off your sofa to do something, to change something. And Kaepernick, what's happened is, it's uncomfortable. America looks at it as being uncomfortable, but at the same time, you got to look. The flag itself is just a material with stripes and stars on it. We don't worship the flag. You know, it's just a symbol of what America is supposed to be, and he sees that there's something wrong with it. And I believe, if he doesn't never play football again, he's not going to change his mind.
What do you think about Adidas saying they would give him a contract if he got signed?
I'm sorry?
I was talking to Sally about you.
Oh.
Adidas,
yeah.
Yeah, Adidas said they would, if he got a contract, if he got signed by a team, they would give him a contract.
I think that's great. I mean, and they meant it. I mean, you can't kind of have one without the other. I mean, you need to have a personality who's going to be paid awfully well in front of people. You can't just do the print news anymore. People have to see. It's all visual. It's on a phone. Very few people watch appointment TV anymore. It's not the way it's working.
It's one of the last few live things that we have to watch, right, sports, because everything else you just watch
That's exactly
on
right.
demand,
Yeah.
Netflix, right?
But the streaming rights, I think is fascinating. Verizon paid $1.5 billion over 5 years for the stream for the NFL games. $1.5 billion. It's just a staggering figure with revenue down. I think it would be really cool if a Procter & Gamble were to offer Colin Kaepernick an endorsement on detergent, because his pants get dirty with the nail. And you seriously, I mean, it would be really clever to do something. And you're like,
No, absolutely, I agree.
yeah, I mean,
agree.
that's the way it should. In my view, that's the way you get out of this.
Because
Is
of
you
all that.
embrace it. You say, okay, look, we have an issue here. It's not going to go away. What do we do to be mainstream and still edgy?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing.
To make a comment, you mentioned it's one of the few things we have left. For a lot of people, protest, you mentioned Judge Woodruff. If there was people protesting out here, we'd shut the blinds and carry on with our lecture, right? But there's a thing where you have to watch, and I paid for it, as the fans' mentality, their sentiment, which is kind of like, to your point where Brady and Kraft support Trump, you're like, maybe my love went down by 2%. So, but there's some people on the fence where they're like, my love went down 2%, and now I'm going to turn off the TV. Because now I have to keep watching. Yeah, because your love is up there. But yeah.
I thought there were a
That's
few
kind of my point, is the protest to some people, it irks them because, to that extent.
So, just sticking with you, I mean, you've done work on concussions, and is this almost a good problem for the NFL to have, that we're talking about national anthem protests rather than really serious neurological issues that, some players have had to contend with?
It's a great point. I think, first and foremost, to backtrack on Colin Kaepernick, I'm in agreement with him kneeling. To a
Would you
certain
kneel
extent.
too? Would you kneel?
I'd probably put my hand on his shoulder.
How about you? How about the other two players? You kneel or hand on the shoulder, or?
When he first started, I would have said I wouldn't necessarily have, but after the president's comments, that would have spurred me to action.
Well, my wife and I are different on this. She would definitely kneel from the beginning. I wouldn't. But if he were on my team, I definitely support him. I understand why he's doing it. I'm in support of that as well. When the Cowboys, and Cowboys, I have some issues with them. But when the whole team kneeled, I definitely would be a part of that as well. But I have different issues in regard to, those that are kneeling and those that don't kneel with this as well.
And also, I would say, outside of that, had I played on a team that the owner said, you're not going to, I would have absolutely tried to rally the troops. We all kneel, fire us all. I dare you.
Right.
So, I mean, that to me is brazen, and I would hope that somebody would call the bluff, but they did.
Yeah. So I'm all for the free speech because I grew up in communism. Came over when I was 11.
Let me talk about that just for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Romania. Now, it ended when I was 3.5, but bullets were still shot through my apartment, so that's that. But, my grandpa actually, he joined the Communist Party because you got an extra tank of propane to heat your home. So he's like, yeah, I'll be one of those, I guess, more or less like a Gestapo where you ratted out your neighbor. Of course, he never did it, but that was the clause where you picked up an extra tank of propane to heat your home because it would be gone by the end of the month. You got one rationed out to you. And if something like this happened in communism, you know, we saw what happened to the Russian double agent, right? They're going to stick some hose underneath your door. So, yeah. So I'm all for it as far as creating the dialogue. The other thing to take it off, or take it perhaps to another level, I think Kaepernick should have continued furthered the situation, the talks. He got the talks going, but he should have had a better team around it. Like even the Castro comment was kind of like, you kind of shot yourself in the foot a little bit. Because you know, even when you have Snoop Dogg standing up against you, then you're like, maybe I did. So, but yeah, he started a conversation. I think another guy that started great conversations was Dave Chappelle. Back in my viewing era, like, because he got the race card going through humor. So it's like, we got a good laugh. Now let's really talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And to answer your question, Michael, I think that you, yes, it does. It allows the NFL not to take the focus off of some of these other issues. In particular, and as you know, an employee of the Players Association, we're always taking that light back home, right? It's like, nope, right, let's get back over here on this. So we are continuing to put pressure on the NFL and the owners because it is something, the health and safety is just not negotiable. We have to do better.
Mary,
Can we come back quickly to one, back to the First Amendment. I forget whether it was Dawn or Judge Woodruff who mentioned Trump's speech and comments as impacting these issues and people's behavior. And is there an argument to be made that there's a First Amendment violation?
what do you think?
in that? I'm thinking not, but
Does he create state action by?
yeah, I think not, but only because I think there's no nexus between what he's saying and the impact that we're concerned about, or the consequence. He doesn't have any whatever other authority he has. He doesn't have any authority to impact what NFL teams do. He can, like any of the rest of us, he can talk and he can cajole and encourage and urge and nudge and whatever, but he doesn't have any official authority to do anything. And so I think that my thought would be that nexus kind of isn't there. But I think it's a really provocative question, whether or not somebody in his position can arguably violate the First Amendment by doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's up for debate in regard to his comments, because he's not Sam Jones and owns AMP. He's the president of the United States, and so if he says something, is that going to can that influence someone? I believe that he can.
It could influence federal law and taxes that impact stadiums. I mean, there are all sorts of potential impacts of this. Let's say he really went with it and went after tax laws that benefit owners. Does that now create a
Hasn't he already done that?
Right.
I mean, the stock market goes up and down like crazy. He says, I'm going to issue some tariffs on this country or this particular material. The stock market reacts just like that, based on something he said. He didn't do anything, but he just said it. It's a huge influence.
Yeah,
I think the disturbing thing about Donald Trump's speech, however, whether it's at a microphone or on Twitter or what have you, is it always seems to be punitive. That he's always looking to punish an enemy, some way, shape, or form. And as I recall, in this debate, he did talk about taking away funding for stadiums and other things. I can't think of any federal funding used unless there's like public transportation involved, and even then, it's mostly state and local. But he often, I mean, even today, the whole thing about McCabe. I mean, the fact that they're referring an act against him, the Department of Justice referral to the DC U.S. Attorney. He has a way of punishing his enemies, and he likes to pick those fights because that gets, again, it gets everybody off something else. And he's been very, very good at that, in a disturbing way, frankly. So, yes, we all have First Amendment rights, but it seems Colin Kaepernick does not.
You know, there's one thing that we haven't discussed, and that is how the audience, certain people in the audience are terribly offended by me taking.
Yeah, but that's one of the.
And it's kind of interesting that we're this late into this, and I just think, I'd like to know what analysts think, because that's what my clients who sponsor and who advertise think. And that's why they aren't supportive, because they're so afraid that their detergent won't be purchased, that their media won't be watched, that the pharmaceutical drugs that they push and push and push.
And push.
Mary Anne,
Yeah.
Channel 5, right?
Yeah, all day long.
So, I mean, it's, you know, it's kind of like drugs in cars. I mean, yeah, every once in a while you get a squeaker, right? It's drugs in cars. So, this is an issue, and for some, you know, the flag is a heck of a lot more. We're still at war. Men and women are fighting for our country and dying, and all of that gets wrapped into the emotional side of this argument. And it's very tough to distance yourself from the reality of that, because people do want to stand, and they do want their players to stand and feel, you know, and I mean, going to some of these sporting events, there seems to be a pattern of addressing and honoring certain of the military who have come back, and that, at least from the call of the crowd, this seems to be a very positive thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, what do you tell fans who are, like Sally said, view it as fundamentally unpatriotic to kneel during the anthem, that it's just disrespectful? There may be some in the audience who feel that way. There's certainly a lot of fans who find that it's reprehensible. I mean, how do you reconcile that? I mean, Rick, as a First Amendment lawyer, how do you reconcile just do you say, well, it's still their right? I mean, that doesn't always extinguish their concern.
I'm so disappointed in the reaction of fans and the public, I guess. You're asked, I know I'm the old white guy who ought to be, waving the flag. I never liked Colin Kaepernick very much until he did this. And now I like him a lot, because he's being the ultimate patriot to me. He is exercising the rights that I think define this country. And I love him for it. I think it's great. I hope he doesn't stop. I hope he sticks to his guns. And it's incredibly disappointing to me that there aren't more people standing up and saying, that's why we're here.
Right.
You know, that's what makes this country terrific. That Colin Kaepernick can take a knee at a football game and send whatever message he wants to send. Why isn't everybody celebrating it? And instead, people are afraid. And we have a president who trades in that, making people afraid. But I don't understand why people aren't celebrating the Colin Kaepernicks of the world who are exercising those rights that we all purport to cherish.
I mean, to your point, he is the
And,
patriot.
one of the things, Kaepernick, he has a reason for kneeling, and he publicly stated that. But prior to Kaepernick, the Beast in Seattle, he didn't stand. He sat on the bench, and no one said a word about it. Prior to Colin kneeling, you had Rashawn Lynch sitting on the bench doing the national anthem. He never stood. And there was not a word said about it.
But I think that, to your point, Colin Kaepernick is the patriot, and we fight wars over these things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we are the country we are. And, there's this great saying by Samuel Johnson that patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. And that's Donald Trump. And I will say this blanket. One thing, just remember I said this, Donald Trump always accuses other people of things that he's guilty of. And I think when we get to the end of this Mueller piece, he will be seen as the least patriotic person ever to have been in the White House. And I think that's why he's playing this card a lot. And it's unfortunately driven by race and culture and everything else, which makes it worse. But Colin Kaepernick has every right to do that, because that's why we have our Constitution. That's why we have a Bill of Rights. That's why we have these freedoms. That's why we fight wars.
But
And yet
why
everyone seems
why
to be
aren't there more of
caving
us
on it.
saying?
I agree.
Let me play devil's advocate. Some people agree, but then say it's still disrespectful.
That's their right to say it. They can say it's disrespectful, and you can applaud him doing it. That's why we all have this great country. It's a right. You have a right to your opinion.
But the sponsors will say, and they're paying for all of it, plus the owners and those stakeholders, they're saying, we pay for a football game.
That doesn't end your rights as an American citizen.
Right? But when you're on a team, it gets messy.
So I love what you're
Democracy's
saying.
messy.
I actually like where you said, we're paying for football. And this is where I keep folks, I have friends who vehemently disagree. And my response typically to them is, when you bought that ticket, what were you paying for? You're paying for a football game.
That's it, right?
And did any player disrupt the football game, what you paid for? And the answer is no. So then the second question is, typically, are you rushing into the stadium 5 minutes before, because that's when they do, 5 minutes before, so you can, and let's get in there so we can see the anthem, hurry up. No, let's get all the popcorn, let's get the beer, let's get this, get the nachos. If I just so happen to be sitting there, that's great, right? But now I'm waiting for the kickoff. I couldn't care less. So if you're paying for that, and sponsor, that's what you're paying for, then, and a fan, well, why are you so angry? To me, there's covert racism. And I'm just sorry, because when you talk about that, yep, there are people who they're passionate about it in the military, and I get it. There are also folks who, and it changed for me when I was at the Baltimore Ravens game, and this was in between last year on the sideline before the game, and all the players took a knee before the anthem, and they booed them to the nth degree. They all stood up before the anthem started, and they start playing the anthem, and they still boo. So now, wait a minute, now I'm thinking we might have touched the nerve on something that you didn't really want to ever go down, this narrative that you just don't like the fact that someone of a different race has the voice that says, I can say and do it, and there's nothing you can do, and you can't make me. And I want to make you shut up. So to me, that's a narrative.
How about, let's say Julian Edelman was the one.
Yeah.
Let's say, not Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
Let's take a white player,
Yes.
a very popular
Jewish white player.
Jewish
Right.
white player. He's the one who does it. Would the reaction just be muted? Would people care? I mean, how does the story change if it's Julian Edelman?
It's hard
What's
to
he
say.
standing for?
He's
Or
same reason.
kneeling.
He's protesting against
Well, Chris
concerns about race.
Chris Long has not taken the brief
That's
Right.
correct.
that Colin Kaepernick
That's
does.
correct.
Chris
Yeah,
Long
that's the
takes a
thing.
knee every
Yeah.
single time, and he is celebrated. And I don't think you can celebrate the military guys and gals before the game and then condemn Colin Kaepernick right now. I mean, that's why they went to war, to let him do that.
And Colin Kaepernick started taking the knee after he spoke to, I don't know if it was an Army Ranger or whatnot, but he had a dialogue, because he sat on the cooler. And then he said, hey, actually, honor the flag or what you kneel for by just taking the knee. And he's like, cool, I'll do that. So he spoke, and he had the guy down on the field plenty of times. Yeah, you can look up.
Interesting.
I watch plenty of YouTube before this.
And we also say, you know, there's a spiritual religious component in it, and so an argument that he gave, which was brilliant, I thought. He said, why in certain religions is it a sign of respect to kneel, and yet you're crucifying me for kneeling after getting that advice? So
Yeah, how do you reconcile that?
how do you
I mean,
reconcile
as
those
someone
two,
who
right?
went to Catholic schooling most of my life, that's a
correct.
pretty, you
Right.
kneel in church, right? That's a,
And I wonder if you, so when I have folks of the Asian descent, we go over there at home, like in our home, you don't take off your shoes when you come in, but in their home you do. So now I take off the shoes, right? So if I'm doing something that I may not necessarily believe in, but I'm doing it out of a sign of respect, it's hard
interesting.
to say, okay, that context is okay, but this one is not.
Yeah,
So
that's really interesting.
And I don't understand fans, after you prefaced it, like you've explained yourself, it's not against the troops. It's for police brutality.
Right. And you made it clear, it's
Like,
not about
it's not, like,
military.
all right, like, are we on a different thing? Now, I did have a dialogue with someone in the room here before we started, and it was about him not saying anything for weeks. And his teammates were just like weirded out, and then they started a dialogue. It's kind of like someone in your company just like behaving weird. And like, hey, can you explain yourself? Is there something going on at home? Versus like, hey, I'm gonna do this, don't get weirded out.
So there was a gap in his explanation.
Yeah.
You
Communication,
right.
which is usually the root of all problems.
Very true. Any other thoughts on that? I want to make sure there's time for our audience to ask questions to our amazing group of panelists. So why don't I begin? And anyone want to push back with what you've heard? Yeah, there we go. Dan.
So as a football fan and to preface, my father was a cop for 35 years. And as soon as Colin Kaepernick took a knee, I didn't have a problem with taking a knee. Like, you can do what you want. But then to follow that up with socks that depict police officers as pigs, when you have police officers in the stadium protecting the fans and protecting the players. And yes, there are bad cops who do bad things, but are you trying to say Black Lives Matter and saying police officers, you're not protecting them? Like, it felt counterintuitive for him to stand up and say, I'm supporting this cause, but all you cops and white people are
He's
not.
half white. So
It was frustrating because he became a martyr when he did wrong things to start a conversation. But that's
Yeah, I
just me.
agree. I thought that was a mistake, something shouldn't have been done. I mean, that's something to get upset about. There's football and police officers, they're just like society. There's a lot of good ones, and there's some bad ones mixed in as well. But the sack issue, it was just poor taste. Something that I believe the majority of us do not agree with. I depend on police every day, and officers to not only just protect me, but protect society as well. And they put their lives on the line every day, and we have to understand that as well. So I thought the sock issue was well beyond where he should have went.
I will say though, in the other side, that Sally, according to your point, millennials just today, they do things loud and in your face. And so, old and being a little bit older, or his senior, I personally think he maybe shouldn't have done that. However, there's a lot of things that young people do today that I think they could, like, why are you doing it that way? And because I can. And so it's just in your face now generation. And so it was a mistake, but I'll chalk it up to him being 23 at that point.
So that's an interesting point. And it raises a question that I've asked myself before about Kaepernick's situation, which is that what is it that people are troubled? And is it that, because as you can tell, I'm struggling to figure out why it is that people aren't rallying to support him. The hair, the tattoos, the kind of smug attitude. And I got to tell you, there's plenty of people in my generation who don't react well to that. And it doesn't have anything to do with what he's protesting, necessarily, okay? I think there are people who look at Kaepernick and don't like him. Before he opens his mouth, before he takes a knee, before he does anything. And I don't know how much that plays into it, but it occurs to me that may be contributed.
I think.
And it goes to Dawn's point about this generation is a little more in your face and a little more, out front. And there are those of us who think that's, I don't like it.
I mean, I think that's a totally valid point. I think what's disappointing to me is not only are people condemning Colin Kaepernick, they're condemning the kids in Florida who had the shooting. I mean, the kids who are amazing kids and who are out there trying to change gun control laws. And what's going on, they are being condemned in every form. And so I think before those kids started getting criticized the way they are, I totally agree with you. I think that there's a whole generalization there, but I think we live in a society now where it is so easy to demonize anybody and everybody on Twitter, on Facebook, on TV, and every platform, and that has become more and more acceptable. And I know I'm like banging on Trump all night, but you know, I think when he arrived, I think our society changed, because what a lot of people may have thought, they then found acceptable to say it out loud and speak it, and now are using social media and television to condemn kids who survived a mass shooting. And that, to me, I mean, all of it's unacceptable, but I think that's what's so troubling about this. Having forums like this are a gift, because we can have a great conversation about all of these things. But this is the exception, and that's the sad part. Everybody gets on this all day long, you know, and I'm certainly the recipient of plenty of it, and I don't care. I mean, I look at all the criticism like, really bring it, because that's what made me. But for everything else, it's just so bad for our society that you can't have these conversations and then fix the problems. And that's what troubles me about all of this.
How much of it is that Kaepernick is just forcing us to talk about things that are also that we think, you know, I think a lot of fans say, well, when I watch an NFL game, I don't want to be thinking about other stuff. I don't want to think about social issues. I don't want to think about political issues. I just want to go watch a game. You know, kind of like how the Patriots play right away, right? They're just laser focused. You just want to watch that. I mean, how much of the story, the pushback against Kaepernick is that he's bringing up a set of issues that that some fans may not want to think about watching football. Do you think that's part of it, Don?
I do. I have a comment, but I know there's questions. I want to go ahead.
Okay,
And
I just had a question specifically addressing Sally's point. I am a California native, lawyer by trade, a San Francisco Niners fan. Prior to this, I did not watch the NFL this season at all as a result of this. A military brat. My family's line of service goes so far back. My grandfather is from Greenville, Mississippi, picked cotton, served 22 years in the service, and then came back to a country that didn't respect him, and still in a lot of ways don't. So your comment was, and I'm sorry, I was like getting so, I don't know why I'm acting crazy right now, but your comment was, why aren't people paying attention to the people who find it offensive that someone is taking a knee? And in my experience thus far, and I'm the assistant athletic director for compliance here at UNH, 88 black men are undergraduates here. 90% of them are athletes. So I have an obligation to this demographic with 68% of black men being in the NFL. And so that comment of why are we not paying attention to those who are offended by it, in my experience, the conversations I've had with individuals, their family haven't given anything for this country. They haven't served in the Army, the Navy, the Marines. My father was a police officer after serving in the Army. And so I really am not sure why are they offended? What exactly have you sacrificed for this country? And his response to unarmed black men being shot down in the streets in plain view was not calculated. He had no idea that this was going to be the ripple effect of it. And yet our focus is on why people are offended at someone else having the right to take a knee. which didn't start as a knee, which was directed by servicemen to take a knee. There's just so many issues I feel with that, and the underlying, in my opinion, to answer your question, the underlying issue is when you have 90% or more of owners that are white men in a nation that has a history of owning the bodies of black men, telling them when, how, and what to do. The issue is they want to control them. And when you say, no, I'm not going to be controlled, now we have an issue. Implicit bias, institutionalized racism, all of this is the issue at hand. We're talking about white men having an issue with black men bucking the system. And that's like so many different layers, but that's just my question to you. Like, why are we focused on that? And people are uncomfortable with stating the obvious when we know the history of our nation. So why are we in this space?
And that goes to kind of your original question, and I thank you for saying that. It is an issue of control. And so you mentioned, like, for instance, this year the rule was passed that you could celebrate. Millennials love it. There's now a top 10 celebrations, and they're playing it over and over, and the views are through the roof. The owners hate it. Old 50-year-old, the demographic.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, they just hate it.
They don't understand.
They don't
They don't
understand.
understand, and
They do
that's
not
part of it too. They
Yes.
don't understand.
So they're saying, and the narrative is, you're disrespecting the game. And we're like, no, we're paying the ultimate respect to the game, but we're doing it in a way you don't like. And so that's where a lot of this gets when you come down to it. Ultimately, it's, well, I respect everybody, but I want you to do it the way that I feel comfortable with, right? And I just think, but if you're of a certain race and you say that, then you sound racist. That's why I have friends who tell me, who are good friends of mine, and I would say they aren't racist. They say, but if I say that, I sound racist. I said, well, if you say that, you are racist. That's a whole other, so that's not any offensive to you. It just is. You gotta, and so we have these conversations like, let's get to the issue.
Well, the good thing is you're having these conversations.
Well, and that's what I would say about Kaepernick,
This is
right?
back to your
Correct.
conversation.
As a nation, we're having these conversations, and nobody wants to really think about, okay, listen, we're 8 years of of being on the precipice of history, having an African-American president. And fantastic. Well, now we got the Trumpification of America, which is, no, y'all ain't in control. We taking it back. We're going to make America great again, which some of our players and owners, we had a meeting and we facilitated it, and our African American players, one of them said, and to an owner, I won't call their name out, he said, when you hear that, what you hear is make America white again. And he was blown away. I've never heard that. And we're like, okay, my gosh, well then you're living under a rock. So anyway.
And a lot of people are living under a rock.
Right.
Yeah, one of the most profound things about it was when he knelt down that Black Lives Matter was the uproar of all lives matter. And when I heard that, I was like, this is pointless. It was just so absurd and ignorant that the whole thing seemed pointless. I was surprised it continued after that point. So the people just didn't get it. And it seemed to be such a large portion of the NFL fan base that all lives matter. You don't understand the whole point of the protest?
And it seemed like the controversy hadn't gone away, I don't want to use that phrase, but it was reignited with the president's comments, right? But it was not...
He could have gone completely the other way.
Yeah.
Everything could have gone the opposite.
Yeah.
That was never happening.
I want to point a question to everyone in the room. Do you think Colin Kaepernick knew that he was risking his $19 million per year?
No.
No.
That chance.
Yeah, because that's a different story. Because I'm thinking, like, if I'm gonna, he said, I'm gonna take a knee until there's social justice, and there's, you know, I mean, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're gonna need your entire career, right? So maybe establish some key performance indicators. If you knew, let's give him the benefit of the doubt that he's risking his 19 million. Why not give the Oakland Police Department 100,000 to put on body cams, and then he can use the angle of, I'm actually mitigating risk for you guys, and vice versa. Everyone benefits. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, but yeah.
That's interesting.
So that's kind of something I was thinking about in response to Mary Anne earlier. You asked, why are people outraged about Colin Kaepernick and not outraged about someone like Chris Long? And we talked about how, like, Chris Long, I mean, he donated his entire paycheck last season.
Yep.
And we see actions like that. But then from Colin Kaepernick, it was the weeks of silence. It was like the pig socks. And so I think as much as we blasted Trump for like divide and conquer, those pig socks, like, I'm also someone with police in my family. It's just one of those things where I think it put a lot of people like on the defensive, or it would raise their hackles a little bit and made Colin Kaepernick not likable, to the fact that even though his actions are spurring a good thing, he still seems unlikable to a lot of people, whereas Chris Long comes in with laughter, and it seems like he's, you know, riding the same wave, but he hasn't had that kind of negative effect that turns a lot of people off, or as many people off, in my opinion. I think.
The only thing I would say is that in response to that is, I think we all have a contextual, cultural framework by which we view the world. And if, no matter what color I am, if someone in my family is harmed by whoever this other party is, I now see this other party different. And so, while I get the pigs narrative and the disrespect that feels, there is a large portion of Americans, particularly Black Americans, by which view the world through that framework, because everywhere they go, they are harassed. And so to them, they are pigs, because there are some cops that are pigs. And so that's what's the tough thing about that, you know. And again, I think I get it, and I do hear you and I understand. However, I just want to point out that a lot of times it's easy to look at the world through our own lens and not step into the world of another.
I wasn't trying to put my own personal.
No, of course,
of course. I wonder how different it would be if instead of those pig socks, you know, he had done something like what Zoltan said, like, you know, reached a hand across the aisle and said, look, there are issues, you know, somehow we work together. How different would this conversation be today is what
But,
I
you know,
wonder.
Kaepernick, you know, he hasn't done a lot of things good in the community. He's donated money, spent his time, you know, all those things. You don't hear about those things. He hasn't donated his yearly salary. I mean, that's a great thing. But it's not like he's not doing anything. I mean, he's been out there from even before he became an NFL, out working with kids, working with families, you know, being involved with charities, donating his money and his time as well. So it's, you know, he's always been involved.
And just one more thing, I'm sorry, I forgot to be on, because I love Chris Long, he's one of my guys. Let's also remember when we do something charitable, we can discount the fact of our background. So you're talking about a guy who comes from wealth, right? And not that it's any easier to be charitable when you have wealth. However, it's easier to be a little charitable when you have wealth. So I can make a decision like that and give up, you know, millions of dollars, because it's not even a blip, right? So nobody's going to applaud, you know, someone who has means, right, to give something as opposed to somebody who doesn't. Again, not that I'm saying they're different. There's just another lens that we always have to remember. And the last thing I'll say is we got to be careful, because there is a historical, cultural reference to the Great White Hope. Because he's white and he's doing this, oh my gosh, he's great. I mean, because he doesn't have to do that. Why would he do that for those people? I mean, you see that, you hear that, and people will say that, and they have no idea what they're saying because it's unearthing things that are uncovering things out of there. So.
Yeah, and I would just add, look, there's no perfect protest, right? I mean, there's no perfect way to make a point. Did I love the Sox? No, but I feel like the Sox started to overtake everything else. So here's a mistake out of months and months and weeks of an effort that, again, the shiny object, they became a shiny object. And totally understand the offense to that, because I didn't love it either. I remember seeing those Sox and went, ugh, you know, but it you know, this week alone, 2 guys were in Starbucks and they got arrested because they didn't buy something or they didn't leave. This week in Philadelphia. Like, that's where we are. That's bad.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have one? I thought you were saying it's amazing.
Yeah, this is mainly for Don and Zoltan. You guys both played with Matt Light, who after the Patriots did the protest against the Texans said, this is the first time I've ever been like, or I haven't been proud to be a Patriot, I'm really disappointed.
Ashamed.
Yeah, ashamed. So do you guys think that if a team were to sign Kaepernick, not only would, I think we can all agree from a media standpoint, there'd be a lot more media attention on it, but it also could be a distraction within the team that certain players on whatever team were to sign him would actually be really offended by what he was doing, and that could cause, you know, friction in the team.
I could absolutely see it happening, but again, like, I love debating both sides, as long as you come to
You played
me
with
with,
Matt Light, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, as long as you come to me with an educated response, I can totally respect it. The fact that people are offended, again, talking about looking at the world through a different lens, and if you have a military family, then you're predominantly going to view that act through that lens, but it's like there are more ways to look at it than one. So, you know, Matt is a big fanatic on hunting and all that stuff, so, and he's very involved with the veterans and all that. I think he's viewing it through that lens. Versus, no, I am totally separating this. Like, this flag stands for more than one thing, and just like, because now I'm supposed to behave because the flag is in front of me. It's kind of like people going to church, and now I'm not cussing, but in the parking lot I'll drop a couple F-bombs. You know, there's plenty of people that go to church on Sunday are in the Ku Klux Klan meeting on Monday, so, you know. Not trying to Venn diagram Matt into that. I'm just saying, it's a different lens that he's viewing it from. So, you know, I'd love to have that dialogue with him.
And Don, you represent all players, right? So you represent Colin Kaepernick, but Matt Light as well. How do you, from a union standpoint, grapple with those issues where the players are viewing these issues from a very different lens?
So thank you for that question. As a union, our position isn't to get into social issue, but it's a contractual issue. It's a CBA issue because we're called to defend any and everything that's in the CBA. When you talk about an issue that you're passionate about, that's a social issue, if a player has been wronged in some way, we have to take an uncomfortable position for that player. But it has to violate the CBA. We can't fight someone's constitutional right. We can fight someone's contractual right because that's our role. So we had to take unpopular positions with players that you mentioned who have had a colored history because the process was wrong, not the action. When a player is punished once for something,
Ray Rice.
there we go.
Yeah.
He's
Double
punished
punished.
again.
Right.
We have to fight that. Now that's unpopular because a video comes out, it's his wife, it's unacceptable. However, this country is founded on you cannot double punish someone, period. But it's okay in the NFL because they're making a lot of money and they should know that. And so they should punish them. But it's just, going back to your point, I wanted to say that about, we moved on. There had been, I think that back before social media, you could do something, you could have a colorful life, you could do things against the law, you could get away with it, you can't. So all of those things that you mentioned, all those players are not in the league. You can get one pass if, I think, it doesn't come out in the public and it's just, there's no, big evidence or something. You might get a pass, you get 6 games, after that you're done.
See, I think it's going to be really interesting going into this next season, in light of the Me Too movement and everything else, the Pulitzer Prizes to the New York Times and Ronan Farrow and everyone else. If an NFL player does something like that, I'm not sure you get a pass anymore.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, you've seen it.
Period.
3 players have had domestic issues, they all were fired.
Yeah.
So,
The question following on that, we opened up the discussion today talking about Curt Flood and the transformation he made in Major League Baseball. It affected everybody. It affected all sports all across. Do you guys think that Kaepernick, when it's all said and done, will have had that kind of impact? Will it get into being transformative to the CBA and how players are actually collectively bargained going forward? Or will it just dissipate away? And then I have a follow-on question, which is, do you think he'll ever play again?
Great question.
Can I add to that question, and then I'm hoping Don will answer? When you look into your crystal ball,
yeah,
how long does the CBA have to go?
3 years.
3 years. Is the next one going to look different? That's a
That's
follow-up
the
to
point. That's the point.
So the first question is, will Kaepernick go down in history as forever changing something?
Curt Flood's not remembered because of his playing stats.
Right.
He was an okay player.
That's correct.
He was an okay player on a pretty good team.
Yeah.
Is Kaepernick
I
go
don't
down
think-
that same
I don't
road?
think we will ever forget Colin Kaepernick. Whether that his action leads to any sort of change, no one will forget Colin Kaepernick. He will be, for that, what he did and what the other players have done, I think will continue to live on. It might die down a little bit, but again, tying it back to, you say, well, why was he doing it in the first place?
Yeah.
And the reason it's never going to go away is because black men are still going to be killed in the streets. And every time one is killed, this is going to bring Kaepernick right back front and center, whether you're a sports fan or not. So that, I'll say that's the first one. And then as to the second one, will he play again? I honestly don't know. If they were smart, the NFL, he would play. You would absolutely. You would allow him to come and play, so then it takes the air out of the balloon. But you're going to lose some of your. It's not a profit margin. You're going to be less rich. You're going to buy 2%. I would guesstimate. I mean, at tops 5%. But let's not kid ourselves.
If you're Roger Goodell, wouldn't you want at this point him to sign with some team, just so that it's not on the table when the season starts?
I mean, you think, and so that's the more troubling thing, because of all clubs in the National Football League, Seattle Seahawks, absolutely, with that owner, should have signed him to a contract.
And with Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll, that locker room, as strong as it was, West Coast, I mean, come on. That's a no-brainer. All of this honestly fades off, probably, and goes away if they just do that. Even if I'd argue they do that, because that was 8 May, and then at the end of the season, they don't give him that many snaps, and then they decide to release him because they've got some quarterbacks and they want to go with the young. They still control the narrative, and yet they didn't. They let it spin out of control. So I don't know if he's going to play again. If they were smart, they would. He should. Just put him on a roster and let him play, because I don't know if you could control him in another way, in the sense of sign him, he'll be the third quarterback, he will never dress. It's a simple way. Now he's on the sideline, he's in street clothes with a hat and a clipboard.
But at the same time, you're watching Johnny Manziel come out and try to get back in the league. RG3's trying to get back in. No one's saying anything about those guys. And of those three, Kaepernick's the better player of the three, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of players that you will see, and this is the tougher argument. So that's I agree the opposite. I like to do that as well. We got to go to the opposite. There are other players who might have had who are at the tops of their positions and don't have jobs. Now, there could be multiple reasons for that. I don't want to pay him. He don't want to take a minimum contract. There's other issues, but there are people who have outperformed those who are on the field and yet don't have a job.
Yeah.
So that's the counter argument to that makes it difficult to say that, because you're looking at numbers surely. Now, the one that kills San Francisco is that stat where you see where they put up Garoppolo's numbers and Kaepernick's. I mean, that's awful.
It's almost identical.
They're literally, and the narrative they say, this guy blackballed, this one $80 million guaranteed. I mean, that's awful. So their PR people, they need to get on that quick, because that is just, I mean, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, they are in trouble. And then they didn't do anything about it. So.
But it seems like the PR people and the advertisers and the branders and marketers are complicit with Trump and his influence on the attitude, because NFL fans aren't necessarily so hateful. I mean, they're taught to boo in Baltimore, and they could be nudged, they could be managed with propaganda techniques, and they could accept Colin Kaepernick in Houston if Johnson & Johnson and Adidas would sponsor Kaepernick and just nudge the fan base. I mean, these fan bases are fickle. They're not. This is not an independent, free expression. This is a kind of mob mentality. They don't even
I think they're
know
scared.
what they mean by.
Honestly, I think they're scared of Trump. He comes after Boeing, stock plummets.
Right.
They don't want that. They just don't. I think they're scared. Anyone
who gave an endorsement to Colin Kaepernick, I'm sure Trump would call that company, call them out publicly, then call them directly and bang on them, which he's done with scores of companies. And then to your earlier point, he takes stocks every day if he feels like it by criticizing one. So yeah.
But that doesn't make him a winner. It would be easy to defeat Trump. I mean, the league could defeat Donald Trump if they wanted to. The NFL is stronger than Donald Trump, and
I think
one of the heartbreaking things about that last year was that they let a vulgar, ignorant loser defeat them. The NFL could have defeated that if they wanted to,
I think a lot
with
of
marketing and branding.
Honestly. He has a lot of friends there.
Well, and just so you know, that's what the players last year, as the Players Coalition was forming and the meetings between players and owners were happening, that was what they were asking the players, was you all can control the narrative. Why are you not controlling the narrative? You know this is not about police brutality. Why are we not putting all of our dollars into getting that, make sure that fact is told? And they were silent. So.
We have time for one more question. I see you.
Oh, were you actually calling on?
You earlier just chose not to respond when I made the clear gesture.
So I just wanted to end with an anecdote. We had a UNH Law trip to the Red Sox game on Friday, and we've been talking about how we haven't really seen a lot of other sports leagues really come out and say we're in favor of what is happening. But in between every half inning, when at every pitching change, there are screens all around the seating areas of Fenway Park, and there was a commercial that played, and it was the armed forces saying that we will kneel with you. And I thought that was very, very moving to see that the Red Sox played that, and they played it throughout the day. It wasn't just one commercial; it was at every stop of the play.
That's great. They have a big vote this week on whether they're going to rename Yawkey Way. So that'll be very telling.
And a lot of big support through the NBA as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, let's give a hand to our amazing panel.